Soulless Dead, Chapter 17, Pioneers. It had been 4 months since I had left Rose Hill and I was making my rounds on the Lower East Side of Wichita. It was quiet, and I was making my way towards a residential area. I commandeered a little pickup truck and even found an old rifle. It looks like fortune was finally smiling on me, and to top it off, the fall months were starting to set in. Most people would say that the summertime would be the best time, but the stench was heinous, it was hot all the time, and to be frank, it was hell on my back problems. The cooler months did the exact opposite to what it would normally do to somebody like me, but it seemed I preferred it. Top it off, the cooler air and the exposed dead were starting to slow down. Their muscles were getting tight from the cold air due to exposure, but they were still coming at us, so I always had to keep my guard up. I made my way down to a parking lot and parked my truck next to some overgrown bushes. I looked out on the horizon of the town, busted glass, papers and trash littering the floors and on the ground. Cars parked in crazy places in the middle of the street, windows busted out, and even a corpse once in a while. Some would say that would be really bad scenery, but there was just something about seeing what was new. I guess this had become such a norm that I wasn't really fazed by it. What is a picture of a post-apocalyptic hellhole is just regular life for some average Joe like me. I guess I was nothing special. I looked over to the back of my truck and grabbed one of those hiding tarps that you can find for hunting blinds. I covered my little truck and made my way down an alleyway in a residential area. I snuck close to a fence and ducked down when I heard some screaming. I bit my lip and I knew that I wouldn't want to be around people. At this point, people were poison for me, and I'm just getting sane again. I raised my rifle and looked down and saw two dead make their way through a broken fence into a backyard. I stood up and slowly made my way in, and I thought I'd just pass it up. Adults are not my priority. They could be dangerous and they could turn on me. And then I heard something that I wasn't prepared for. I could hear little kids screaming, and they had to be no older than 8. It made me think of my family. I squatted down again, I ran my hands through my hair, and I grabbed my helmet off my side and I put my mask on. I ran my way down the street as quietly as I could and made my way towards the opening in the fence. The two dead were shuffling in. I pulled the knife out of my sheath on my belt and put the rifle on my back. I grabbed him by the shirt, pulled him down, and as he was falling, I braced him with my knee and stuck my knife through his forehead. Sliding my knee from underneath him, he dropped to the floor and made a thud. I gritted my teeth and winced. I was like, damn! The other one turned around and swatted at me. I ducked it Muhammad Ali style, slashed his stomach, and as he fell over, I put the knife through the back of his head, grabbing his shirt as he fell, slowly letting him down. I looked on and I heard the kids screaming again. The dead were furiously smacking against an old tent shed that wasn't going to hold up much longer. I grabbed my war club off of my lower part of my belt. I took the spike sheath off and made my way slowly. One of them had started to pry the door open and was wrenching it slowly down. I could hear a younger woman's voice, no older than 19, saying, "Stay back," but a lot of good that would do. I took my club and hit one of them in the leg closest to me. His leg cracked and it let out a large growl. He hit the ground and I stuck the knife through his head, pulled it out, and as the other one looked over, he swiped at me. The kid screamed again. He ignored me for a second time and started swatting at the door again. Big mistake, big fella. I said, "Hey!" He looked at me again and swatted at me, and I hit it with my club as hard as I could, smacking and breaking his arm. I could hear the bone crack as it protruded through the rotted flesh. He lunged at me with his hand stuck in the pried part of the door, biting at me. I smirked and stuck my knife through the bottom of his jaw. His teeth were crunching down on the blade as it went diagonally outside of his cheek. His teeth were cracking, and I said, "This is too easy." I reared back with my club and planted the spike right between his head, and it caved, splattering everywhere. It went so bad it was like one of those watermelons at a Gallagher show. I yanked him away from the door and unlocked the door, and slowly poked my hand in, waving and telling them everything's okay. I slowly walked in and set my club against one of the walls. I braced myself on a little workbench and kneeled down next to them, the girl glaring at me. I was right, roughly around 19 or 20. She said, "What do you want?" And I said, "You're safe now, don't worry." She said, "How do I know I can trust you?" I stood up and started to walk out the door. I didn't need this, I thought. I looked back and said, "You can't trust me. Not on your own. You're going to have to put your faith in me. I know you've probably been through quite a bit, but you need to get out of here. The screaming and the yelling is going to attract more of them. You've probably got 5 minutes or less to get out of here. I took care of your friends, now go." She stood up holding the kids close to her in both of her hands. She said, what if I can't trust you?" I said, "Then we need to leave now." I turned around and looked at the kids. Their legs were sunk and they were emaciated, clearly hungry. I grabbed one of the kids and put him on my back, and I had her follow me. As we were running, I could see her wincing, and I looked down at her shoes, and they were worn out. She probably had blisters the size of hay pennies at this point. She said, no, we need to keep going," and as we hobbled our way to the truck, I set them in the front seat and had her hop in the back. I gave her a handgun just in case. I pulled the tarp over the truck and put it back into the back and started the car and made my way back to the riverfront where I lived. I drove the car down into the parking garage after I lifted the gate, carrying the kids inside and up to the 3rd floor. It had been a while since I had carried a kid, so I was a little winded. I had them follow me down to the 3rd room where I was living. I sat them on the bed and gave them some water and some food. A Cliff Bar, nothing too much, but I didn't want to make them sick. As soon as I gave it to them, they ripped it open like a present on Christmas and noshed on it like a fat man eating a cheeseburger. Smiles glowed across their face. It made me smile. The girl opened up and told me her name was Amy, and as she slowly ate, I could tell that she was hungry, and I told her, "It's fine, go ahead." She about stuffed the whole thing in her mouth. I asked them how long they'd been alone. She said that they were with a group of older people a couple months ago, but unfortunately, they were left behind. I shook my head. I felt so horrible for them. She said that they were running out of food and they didn't want to feed us. They didn't want to have to deal with the kids screaming, so they left. I looked at the kids. I held her hand and said, "You guys are going to be safe with me." But in my head, I knew that was probably a lie. I wasn't sure. So I guess I had to lie to them. I told them, "Eat as much as you need to." We talked for a couple more hours, and I lit a little stove and made the room nice and warm. She said it started to get cold, so they were starting to try to duck into houses, but unfortunately there was hardly anything to eat. And at one point, they had to eat dry food from a dog pound. I winced and gritted my teeth and said, "It's not going to happen here." I made a cup of coffee from the complimentary packets and poured some creamer and sugar like I do in the mornings. Made that for her, and she grabbed the cup of coffee and sipped it with both hands. Smiling, she said, "This isn't, the high-end stuff that I was used to when I was an art student. But it's something." I smiled and said, "It's probably the first hot drink you've had in a bit." She said, "It's nice." I handed her a Snickers bar, and she smiled again and said, "Wow. No one's ever been this nice to us." I said, "Look, what happened to you guys isn't fair, and these are children. To be honest, I sat in the alleyway debating whether or not I should help you guys. I'm a terrible person, to be honest." She held my hand and said, "No, it's fine. These days you can't trust anybody." She said, "We've had to run away from our fair share of bad people." We sat and talked for what seemed like a couple more hours. As I started to doze off, my ears perked up to the horrible sound of a car hitting a building. I ran out to the balcony, and Amy followed close behind, making sure the kids were okay. I pulled a handgun from my holster and handed it to her, not staring at her, saying, "Hold on to this." I looked out the window and I saw 2 cars. One of them had pulled up next to the wrecked car. It was just up the street. They started firing. I gritted my teeth like, no, don't be doing that. I looked down at the street where I was at, and I could see the dead starting to wander towards the sound. Shit, I thought. I gotta do something. I can't just ignore them. Not in front of these people. I'm just now getting people to trust me. I didn't know what to do. It was a dilemma for sure. I didn't know if they were hostile, so I put all my armor on and grabbed my rifle and ran down the street. After I made my way down the stairs, I had Amy walk close behind, and I told them to stay quiet and calm and stay low. I walked my way up the sidewalk, hugging the building to make sure to duck into cover if they were dangerous. I could see them fighting, and they were starting to run out of bullets as I hid behind a mailbox. So they started clubbing it with found crowbars and other bludgeons, and even hitting them with the butts of their rifles. Two other people were starting to fish two older elderly people and a injured guy out of the wreck. Dead that I didn't notice in my blind spot climbed on me and I fell to the ground. I didn't want to make any noise in case they were dangerous, and I grabbed the knife from my sheath and held its head just far enough to stick the knife quietly through its head. It seized up really quick and then went limp, and I slowly pushed it to the side as I drew my knife out. I sheathed it again and looked down the sights and clipped one that was trying to reach for two people trying to crawl out of the car. They all their heads perked up, shocked to hear a shot going off. They weren't sure who did it, like a bunch of prairie dogs in the middle of a prairie hearing a coyote cry. I waved my hand frantically, telling them that I was okay. Gritting my teeth, I was hoping they weren't going to shoot me. If you've ever been shot, it's not something you want all the time. As a matter of fact, ever. They nodded their head as they pushed people away, and one of them made their way through the dead and asked me, "Who are you?" And I told him there's no time. "Are you guys able to load any of those people up?" And he's like, "Unfortunately, we've got kids in the other car." I told him, "Okay, just make your way down the street. There will be a small parking garage with the gate down. I need you to open the gate up and drive your car through there. I'll help the other people." He ran back and told the people what was up. He helped the other three people, help him pull out the injured people, and the other car took off down the street. I grabbed one of the elderly people over my shoulder, and we hobbled our way down the street back to my home. Amy unlocked the door, and I walked in and set one of the old men against the wall that was bleeding. Their leader was named Phil. He was lurched over, breathing heavily, and he said, "Thanks, man." "My name's Phil. It's good to meet you." I pulled my glove off and shook his hand. It was probably the first handshake he'd ever had in quite a while. He then told me that they had been on the road for months, dealing with marauders, breakdowns. They originally had 6 cars, but now they're down to 2. 1 now. I told him that kind of stuff happens. He said, "Thank you so much for helping us." I went over to the wall and met one other guy, and he was looking at me, unsure, shooting daggers, and I laid my rifle against the wall next to Amy. She reached her hand out and said, "Don't worry about it." I shook his hand and said, "You're safe here." He looked at me and said, "That's what the other 5 people said." I said, "You don't need to worry about that." By this time, 2 people were making up the stairs, and I opened it up, and it was from the parking garage. 3 kids whizzed by me, fast. The other 2 were carrying an injured guy, and he'd been sick for some time, it looked. Upon second glance, I could tell that all of them were emaciated and hungry, so I took them up to the 3rd floor after securing everything. Phil had found all of them and started commandeering cars and starting a little group together. Apparently, they had been driving since Illinois and made their way down here somehow after taking a wrong turn. They were telling me all these fantastical stories, and I was shocked. And deep down inside, I was actually kind of happy I found people. 2 of them were doctors. They were the parents of the 2 kids, and they've been treating these older folks. They met at a community center that was full of them. Apparently, the military just left them there after they were overwhelmed. They made their way down here, and it was nice. I gave them all the water and the food that they wanted, and we sat down around in the hallway with a nice heater stove going. Amy was taking care of the kids and putting them to bed. And one of their men took out an old guitar. It had been a while since I heard music, and we told stories, and he sung some folk songs. Old ones, like Wayfaring Stranger and things like that. We ate and we talked, and while the tension was starting to defuse. I told them my story, even though I withheld some information, for either my own safety or theirs. I smiled and I said, "It's nice to see more people. For a while, I was on my own." Phil laughed and said, "You've done a damn good job protecting yourself and staying alive. It's a damn gold mine here." I laughed and I said, "It wasn't always like that." It's like, "Where are all the people?" he asked. "They all couldn't have turned into dead." I proceeded to tell him that a lot of people were just migrating out of here. And while they were migrating, the dead subsequently followed them, so it was relatively quiet around here. It was nice. It was nice to finally meet people with civilized culture. We talked, and it was funny how we were like, "Man, it's just like the pioneer days." I laughed and said, "Yeah, it is." Phil got silent and then frowned and said, "It was." You ever hear a story? 6 wagons were heading from Kansas over the mountains and down to California during the gold rush. By the time it was over, only 2 of them made it. That was us. So yeah, we are like pioneers. We started with 6 cars full of people. Jack, Aaron, Tanya, Bill, Philip, his 2 cousins. Just to name a few. I put my hand on his shoulder and said, "You're safe here, man. I know a lot of people have promised you that. I know a lot of people have told you that. And a lot of crooked bastards out there have lied to you. But you've got children, and you've got a family, and you've got someone who's got your back." One of them spoke up and said, "How do we know we can trust you, though? We've heard that, too." I looked at him and said, "You ran out of bullets midway through that little fight you had out there. If I really wanted to take you guys down, I would have shot you guys from a distance and waited till you were out of bullets to take care of you. But I didn't." Phil walked me out to the balcony in my little supply room that I lived in. We sat on the chair and popped some water. He said, "It's been a while since we've talked to anybody. These people need this hope. I mean, yeah, we've got doctors, but what good are they when we keep getting eaten or overrun? There are people out there that'll shoot indiscriminately just because you're alive." I looked at him and said, Sometimes we gotta stick together. We're pioneers, man. And that's the way it's supposed to be."